Welcome to the Foxery. This is Trix, and I'm a clinical psychologist. Today I'm talking about psychological change. In particular, I'm asking the question, who or what changes? Who changes? Or could we say, what changes? We need to know what or who changes, because if we are going to change, we need to know indeed what part of us actually can change. And so let's move on to the first common mistake that people make when discussing psychological change, and that is the body. It's very easy when you look at someone to see the body and just naturally presume that's the person as you look at them. Let's call this guy Fred. This is Fred, who's our little model for today's demonstration. And we want to prove that the body is not a great model for psychological change. If we look at the body as a whole, we tend to think that's the person, that's the individual. We can do a little experiment by cutting off Fred's arm, like this. That, in fact, let's put his arm on the ground. Let's add a little blood for some drama. Oh no, my arm has been cut off again in a terrible accident. That even without Fred's arm, Fred still exists. And if you were to ask him, are you still there? He would of course say, yes, I am, even without his arm. Then of course, if we just went ahead to drive home the point and dismembered Fred totally, then of course, let's add a little bit more drama. Let's get some blood spurting. Let's just spice this video up a little bit. There we go. And of course we just put the limbs scattered willy-nilly on the ground like this. More blood, of course. There we go. Even without Fred's limbs, Fred still exists. So we say that we are not the body. This experiment, we could say, allows us to make that claim. Clearly, Fred is not the body if we can remove bits of the body, and Fred still claims to exist. And so therefore, we need a better model of Fred, meaning Fred the person, not a better looking model. Fred, unfortunately, has reached the pinnacle of human beauty and cannot transcend that any further. Okay, so if we look to the right of this diagram, let's go to this new part here. In fact, let's get rid of Fred for a second. See you later, Fred. Okay, now we'll put a new diagram. This circle here is a new model that we're going to call the ego. Some people call it the ego. I prefer to say ego because everyone is familiar with that pronunciation. The ego, we know from psychology, is generally regarded as a bad thing, often due to the connotation of it being selfish or self-centered in some way. However, we'll just throw that definition out the window, and we're just going to go ahead and say that the ego is me, or my personality, if you like, or the person I take myself to be in some way. Maybe my identity, even. It's not quite true identity, but it's pretty close. We could just say I. When we say I, we are referring indeed to the ego. If we use the ego as a model for the person, rather than the body, this allows us far more flexibility in our thinking about psychology and psychological change, and it's a way better model than the body. And now it allows us to ask the key question, how does the ego change, or under what circumstances does this ego change? Yeah, how and why and when and all those kinds of questions. If we go back just for a second to the old model, there's Fred. We're just looking at Fred as a body. Let's go ahead and kindly reassemble. Oops. Just got to make sure I'm clicked on the right layer here. Kindly reassemble Fred like so. Like that. There we go. A little bit of residual blood, but that's to be expected when you reassemble a body. Even though we've put Fred's arms and legs back on Fred never actually went anywhere. If you were to ask Fred, are you now back because your arms and legs are back on you? Fred would reply, no, I was always here. It was always me, even without key parts of my body. And so we don't look at the body as the object of change anymore. Okay, that'll do for this video. Just a brief introduction to the ego or the ego and why we should not look at the body as our thing that changes psychologically. Join me again and we'll discuss the ego in greater depth and learn how it changes and why. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Your comments are very welcome.